All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our BCBA practice question series, where we're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. As a reminder, we are now on the sixth edition since it is 2025. So these questions will involve sixth edition task list items. As always, check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. A software company trains new employees to run a diagnostic test. A training manager notes how many attempts each trainee needs before they complete the test flawlessly from start to finish without any errors. Once a trainee has successfully performed it 3 times in a row, they are considered proficient. Which measure of efficiency is the manager using? So a new item on the sixth edition task list is this idea of efficiency. We want to be efficient in our training. We want to be efficient in our programming, because the more efficient we can be, the more we can get done on a day-to-day basis. Now, the question wants to know, what measure of efficiency are we using? And the measures you typically need to know are duration of training, trials to criterion, and then the cost-benefit analysis. Now, in this case, we know the company is training the employee to run this test. The manager is trying to figure out how many attempts each trainee needs before they basically master the task, right? They're trying to do it flawlessly. Once the trainee has performed it 3 times in a row, they're considered proficient. So the training manager is looking at how many times it takes the trainee to perform it 3 times in a row to be proficient. So when we set a target number for mastery and we count how long it takes to reach that mastery, what measure is that? A, rate of responding. Rate of responding is just rate, how frequently somebody is engaging in a response. We're not measuring rate here, right? The manager here wants to know how many times it takes for the trainee to get it 3 times in a row. What they're trying to figure out is not necessarily how quickly the trainee is responding. B, duration of training. Duration of training is exactly how it sounds. How long does it take to train? So in this case, the employee has been trained, and now the trainee is trying to do it flawlessly. So we're not necessarily worried about how long it took to train. What we're worried about is how long it's going to take the trainee to become proficient. So what the manager is looking at is trials to criterion. Our trials to criterion is going to be how many times the trainee takes to reach 3 times in a row, because that is our criterion. And then D, inter-observer agreement. Of course, is when 2 or more people are measuring the same thing, and then they compare their measurements to see how they compare against each other, see if the data are accurate, if they're valid, if they're reliable, or if something needs to be changed. No inter-observer agreement is happening here, so D is not an option. What the manager is using is trials to criterion. They are trying to figure out how long it's going to take for the trainee to complete this 3 times in a row. Carmen has been craving coffee all morning. On her way to work, she spots a sign with a picture of a coffee cup and the word cafe underneath the picture. She exclaims, "Let's stop for coffee now." What statement best describes control over Carmen's verbal behavior? So this is an interesting question in the way it's worded, because it has this idea over control over Carmen's verbal behavior. Now, on our sixth edition task list, we have this idea of multiple control. And multiple control is when our verbal behavior comes under the control of more than one thing in our environment. So if we think about a command, right, a request, that is typically under the control of an MO. But if we see a sign and we read the sign out loud that says cafe because we want the coffee, well, the MO and the sign now both have control over the verbal behavior. So the idea behind multiple control is our verbal behavior can be under the control of more than one thing in the environment. In this case, Carmen's been craving coffee. She spots a sign with a picture of coffee. So we'll start there, right? She's been craving coffee. So there's motivation to get coffee. We already know that. She also spots a sign with a picture of a coffee cup and the word cafe. Once she sees that, she says, "Let's stop for coffee now." What has evoked Carmen's verbal behavior? Well, 2 things: the craving for the coffee and then seeing the sign with a picture of a coffee cup. So what has control over Carmen's verbal behavior? A, the only controlling variable is the sign. Well, we know that is not necessarily true because she's also craving coffee. B, Carmen's verbal behavior is simultaneously under the control of her craving and the sign. Yes, that is what multiple control is. Her verbal behavior has been affected or influenced by more than one thing in the environment. C, Carmen's verbal behavior is under no controlling variables. It's spontaneous. No, she has cravings and she sees the sign. D, only the craving controls her verbal response. She's had those cravings all morning. Only once she saw the sign did she say, let's stop for coffee now. So the cravings combined with the sign has influenced her verbal behavior. B, Carmen's verbal behavior is simultaneously under the control of her craving and the sign. You're implementing a matching to sample program that calls for your client to match one animal with another similar animal. You lay out 3 cards on the table, hand a card to your client, and then say match this, while also accidentally glancing at the correct card on the table. The accidental glance will be considered a blank. Pretty easy question here. We are thinking about the accidental glance here. Now, what do we know about this situation? We know we're teaching matching to sample. The client has to match one animal with another. So you put 3 cards on the table. You have a field of 3. You give your card to the client and you say match this. So your SD is match this. But when you say match this, you also accidentally glance at the correct card on the table. What is that accidental glance? Is it a movement prompt, a positional prompt, an inadvertent prompt, or a gestural prompt? Now, be careful here, right? Because you could maybe make the case that glancing at the correct card is a gesture, but you're not meaning to do that, right? So, as is a movement prompt, you're not intentionally doing it. When you don't intentionally provide a prompt, but you prompt anyway, we call that an inadvertent prompt. That accidental glance is going to be inadvertent and it's going to be considered an inadvertent prompt. A positional prompt, of course, is if you have, let's say, 3 stimuli in a row and you start moving them around positionally, that's a positional prompt. The accidental glance in this case would be an inadvertent prompt. A new hire learns to make espresso drinks correctly at one branch of a coffee shop chain. After mastering the skill in a specific store, the barista is transferred to another location where the equipment and workflow are slightly different. The hire successfully applies the same espresso making steps in the new environment. Which of the following strategies would best promote generalization of the steps to new coffee shop locations? Okay, long, lengthy question with some long answer choices. We're not going to panic. We're going to attack the question like we always do. Don't jump straight to the answer choice. We're looking for the strategy that is going to best promote generalization to new coffee shop locations. What do we know? We know the hire is trying to make espresso drinks at one branch, which is great, but we're trying to generalize that. So we mastered the skill in that store. The barista then goes to another location and then applies the same steps in the new environment. So that's great. It already seems like generalization is occurring. So if we want to continue that and promote generalization, what strategies might we use? A, teach the barista only in one location to ensure mastery before moving them. Well, teaching in one location with the same stimuli over and over again is going to master or help strengthen that skill in that environment, but it's not necessarily going to promote generalization. B, provide multiple training sessions in different store layouts with varying equipment. Sure, if we change up the environment, we change up the equipment, and we start to implement some of these generalization strategies, that's going to be pretty effective. Remember, we plan for generalization. We train for generalization. C, reinforce only the completion of each drink. Well, each drink is the, let's say, terminal behavior, right? We want to look at the steps. So just reinforcing the end of each drink doesn't necessarily mean all the steps were reinforced or even correct. And then D, instruct the barista to ask for help whenever they encounter a new machine or setup. Asking for help is an important skill, but that's not going to help with the steps, right? Because each time they encounter a new machine or setup, someone's just going to have to show them how to do it over and over again. And that's not generalizing what we've taught them. So in order to generalize what they've learned and what they know, we should provide multiple training sessions, different store layouts with varying equipment. It's just a different way to talk about some of our generalization strategies. Brian is a new behavior technician at a busy ABA company. On his first day, Brian is given the employee manual, which goes through basic protocols of the company's clinic. Brian is asked to read each step in the protocols out loud and then demonstrate the steps afterwards. What verbal operant is demonstrated by Brian in this scenario? Pretty straightforward verbal operant question. We just want to focus on Brian, right? Because Brian is at this company. He's given a manual, which has all the protocols. And then Brian is asked to read each step in the protocols out loud and demonstrate. Now, we're not worried about what Brian was asked to do. We're looking at Brian's verbal behavior. And that's the key to this question. What is Brian's verbal behavior? We're asked to read each step of the protocols and then demonstrate the steps. So if Brian is reading, what type of verbal operant is that? Because that's the only operant Brian is doing here. A mand. A mand is a request, typically evoked by an MO. Has Brian had any motivating operation-based request? No. B, textual. Textual is reading written words. In this case, Brian is reading each step. That is our verbal operant. C, transcription. Transcription is listening or hearing verbal words and then writing them down. Transcribing. Brian is not transcribing these words, he's reading them. D, interverbal. Interverbal is essentially a conversation, right? Here it's evoked by a verbal SD, and you respond without point-to-point correspondence. Brian is not engaging in interverbal here. He is reading each step and then demonstrating those steps. So the verbal operant demonstrated by Brian is going to be B, a textual. Thanks for watching. Check out behavioranalyststudy.com for all of our study materials. When you pass your exam, please let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.